Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Agenda IDS of the year. I'm Patricia Porto, the Academic Coordinator of Dannemann Siemsen Institute. Agenda IDS is an online event in which we address important topics regarding intellectual property, law, and technology. I always invite experts on the subject to share their experience with us. And those who miss the live event will be able to access the record content available later on Dannemann Siemsen Institute website. And today we will debate about the growing influence of dupes industry, such as cosmetic, fashions, and consumer goods, as well as the impact on IP right holders. And to discuss this topic today, we invite two experts on the matter. And please, let me introduce our guests. Today with us, we have Alastair Gray. Welcome, Alastair. Alastair is the International Trademark Association Director of Anti-Counterfeiting and is the staff liaison of over 340 volunteers of the IDS Anti-Counterfeiting Committee, which develops the association policies and positions on combat trademarking counterfeiting worldwide. Alastair is also currently signed as an expert in the DUPES Observatory Expert Groups on cooperation with intermediaries, which studies, among other subjects, infringement in social media. We also welcome David Lipkus. Welcome, David. David is a lawyer and founder of Lipkus Law LLP in Canada. David has dedicated his practice to stop infringers from using or reproducing his clients' intellectual property without permission in Canada and online. David's principal focus is on intellectual property brand protection for trademarks, copyrights, and industrial designs. And to moderate the event, we invite Rafaela Borges Walter Carneiro. Welcome, Rafaela. Rafaela is a lawyer and partner at Dannemann Siemsen. She holds an LLM in intellectual property law from Philipps Universität Marburg in Germany. She works at all levels of trademark protection process, and her expertise includes the strategic management of national and international portfolios. And I would like to thank very much our guests and the audience for being here today with us today. And now I will give the floor to Rafaela. Please, Rafaela.
So hi, guys. Good morning. I will be short. So it's a pleasure to moderate this panel, having David and Alastair with us. We'll talk a lot about dupes. Dupes is a short for duplicates, and there is a lot of discussion on how dupes is going to be treated as a infringement or not. The thing is that the dupe market has exploded in popularity, mainly with the influencers, and on platforms like TikTok or YouTube, the hashtag dupe has surpassed 4 billion views, showing how these products are really capturing the attention of consumers, especially the younger generations. So there is an excellent chance to have David and Alastair here to go ahead and think and propose this discussion with us. So Alastair, in your experience, do you think that consumers, they actively seek dupes as a budget-friendly alternative, or do they simply want a product with similar performance? First question. Do you see that there is a generational division in the attitudes towards dupes, that is with younger consumers being more accepting than the older luxury buyers?
Great question. And again, thank you so much for having me here as well. And again, like David, and I realize we are wearing a matching uniform, so we're almost like dupes of each other. Two sides of the coin. But yeah, I want to also start with a story, actually. And it goes back, I think we must have started our careers at roughly the same time. And it was in the late 2000s. I was an investigator at that time. So I would be going out into stores and buying products and that kind of thing. And in the UK, and it was probably more famous than that as well, there was a really popular boot that just kind of exploded on the market. It was probably driven by kind of reality TV shows where you would have, like David said, these are kind of at that time, micro influencers, or what became influencers at that point, and where everyone wanted to get hold of these products, no matter what it was. And I think I did this one investigation, and I went around the city of Birmingham in the UK, and I was buying up these boots as a guy just walking around, walking around like 20 versions of this same boot. But that was the kind of start of the dupe, culture really. And I think they all had like slight variations, but they were basically doing the same thing, trying to replicate that same brand product. And I had to kind of get that train home with like a duffel bag full of the boots. But I think what that showed, and the stores that I was going into, it was this kind of budget friendly alternatives that people were thinking that they would be able to get this cheaper version of what everyone wanted. And I think if you look at what's happened today is, I mean, even go back a couple of years, like PwC did a study, they found like almost 70% of people were holding back on essential spending across like 25 jurisdictions. So I think we're still living through those times where not so many people have that purchasing power anymore. And I think dupes do seem to offer that way for consumers to kind of enjoy the product, enjoy the products that they think without the price tag of the original one. And obviously dupe implies that kind of mimicry and the appearance, the function of the original, but claiming the similar performance at a lower cost. But I think one thing that we had from our podcast, the Brand and New podcast, we had Cassandra Bankson, who's like a huge influencer around kind of dupes and dupe cosmetics. And she said, well, dupes provide a solution to a problem. And I think that's for consumers. And again, David says, this is kind of the lens we need to look at this through, is the consumer approach to it. Because we're in that kind of globalization, everything, people want things kind of now and then. And again, going back to my fashion days, we always kind of looked at things that kind of, you have the innovators who are the ones going out and daring to be different and trying those new things. Then you'd have the kind of early adopters. And I think the world we're in now is everyone wants to be the early adopter, or they can be, because you can go online and you can pretty much find any product you want. So I think that's where we're kind of getting to as well. I think it's the approach to products has really changed as well. I think going towards the kind of generational divide, I think that's, when you look at the kind of the dupes that are on social media, it's often perfumes, cosmetics, clothing, accessories, which isn't that surprising given that like huge numbers of people are now buying via live streaming and that kind of thing as well. And I think in some ways, it might seem like a Gen Z thing approach or a millennial approach, but I think actually it's kind of broken it down. I think like I said, anyone can go and get these products. So no, it's just generally how popular is that product and how explosive has it been that makes people want it. And I think that's going to be the key, really. The way we look at it in the future, it's not just picking out like this one consumer group that we need to kind of educate or target. It's kind of everyone. And how do we do that?
Great, thank you. Alastair, do you believe that consumers, they understand the difference between dupes and a counterfeit, or there is a gray area in between?
I think it's a really good question again. And I think like picking up on what David said, I mean, from the comments that I read online on kind of Instagram, TikTok and Reddit, I think there is a kind of gray area. I mean, dupes obviously aiming to, like David said, it's kind of what elements are being borrowed and in terms of the brand and that kind of thing as well. But I think one of the gray areas is when dupes resemble that original product so closely that consumers just mistake them or either for counterfeits or even, the other kind of way around, or the counterfeiters are even borrowing elements of the dupe to try and get around, platform protection or brand owners as well. Because they'll basically, what I used to see as well in terms of the way that they would approach it in terms of e-commerce, counterfeiters will strip out everything to do with the brand now as well. And then you can kind of do the checkout, but then you actually get the counterfeit in the end as well. So there is this kind of increasing kind of complexity there. And people do use terms like reps, replica, dupes, or dupes spelt differently as well. Like it gets these kind of more cute kind of ways of approaching it. David mentioned kind of inspired by, which is a classic kind of way that especially kind of cosmetics and perfumes are kind of used. And I think this interchangeability with dupes and counterfeits as well is happening a lot more. So people don't even distinguish between them. Like a dupe can be a counterfeit, or it can be, yeah, a copy type product of a product, the way that David's kind of explained it. And I think this is kind of breaking down a lot of the barriers as well, in terms of the way people think about intellectual property. Because the more that we've, as brand protection professionals, we've kind of taken on infringers, we've pushed them further and further into kind of hidden link schemes or private access websites and closed forums and that kind of thing. And I think that's made the gray area kind of even more. You have pushing people, one, if they're intentionally about buying counterfeits, to go down that route. But I think actually we might start seeing it for other things as well. Like when people really want to get this style, they're either it's going to be completely out in the open and then it might get taken down, or they'll start going down these kind of rabbit holes of where to find the product. And I think video content as well has really become breeding grounds for letting information grow and explode as well. And I think with dupes are the same. You kind of have these echo chambers of, yeah, like I said, people aren't necessarily making that distinction anymore, which I think is really challenging for many brands as well. And I think one other thing to kind of pick up on, though it wasn't particularly to do with dupes in general, but INTA did a study which was back in 2019 around kind of Gen Z and counterfeit, and kind of looked at their attitudes and perception as well. And I think what we found was that at that time, basically price will always trump morals. And I think that's one of the things when you get into like the ethical questions around dupes as well, and how that's going to kind of play out when people are making these decisions. And actually, like at that point, I think 79% of Gen Zers had purchased fake products, which means they're already kind of open to choosing a copy or choosing a counterfeit. And I think dupe kind of opens that Pandora's box even more, or opens the door to where is the moral gray area about this, when it's products that are taking other people's designs and everything else and just copying them, and you kind of lose the IP and the creativity behind it. So I think it's a challenging one, and I think we're yet to see the end of it, I think, in terms of how this is going to develop and really influence kind of counterfeit purchasing behaviors in the future.
Alastair, do you think that dupes, how do dupes affect the brand reputation, exclusivity, and the consumer trust?
I think David's just done a fantastic job in answering that. I think it really does come down to, I mean, it's exactly what he said. It's the dilution. And I think that's the challenge that brands have. And it is because you have that kind of halo product that goes out and everyone wants it. And then suddenly the market's completely flooded with similar, but not the same. And it means that, it completely erodes that exclusivity of that product. But it also, as David said, this isn't a quality thing. This is you're trying to get to the market as quickly as you can with the cheapest product as you can to be able to sell it. And that's the fundamental bottom line of that. And I think, it is that kind of worrying look at what is this knock-on effect going to be when brands have a dupe products coming through, because they've obviously done that research, the production, the advertising, secured the IP rights, which David mentioned as well. And consumers are turning away from that original because they're looking at it and thinking, well, it probably is, it could be the same, or like I'm going to just take this option because, as I mentioned before, it's for consumers, it can be the solution to a problem, the problem of exclusivity, and also like the desirability of that product. And I think, I guess the other side of it, coming from the brand experience side of things, where consumers do kind of have residual mistrust from bad experiences. Like if you do buy that counterfeit and you go to customer service and say, well, your product is rubbish, and then the customer service around and say, well, that wasn't our product, they're still more likely to not buy your product again because they just have that bad experience. And I think it goes down to everything when we're talking around imitations of things. I mean, there's huge volumes of kind of spoof profiles of brands online. And I think that's another whole challenge that obviously we're not talking about today, but yeah, when people get scammed by someone imitating a brand, then again, that has a negative experience. Are they likely to trust that brand going forward? And so I think a lot of this is kind of wrapped up in that approach of thinking what is the impact on the consumer's vision of this? And I think it's slightly tangential, and David will be familiar with it as well. But one thing I worked on as well was the copycat brands. That there were a lot of these kind of exploding in different places in the world, where you would have companies that would register kind of very similar marks, but then they would transform them. So they would start adding new elements into the registered rights that they had to get as close as they could to the original brand, but then they would also copy all the product designs and the marketing materials. And this is like, yeah, I guess dupes on steroids, but not so much of a trademarking, as a counterfeit, because they weren't necessarily trying to be a counterfeit. They were just trying to imitate in that way. And that some brands have been really impacted by that, because you would suddenly have this kind of direct competitor looking more or less the same as you, springing up with stores and having sample sales and everything else. And I think brands also need to kind of continually be aware of that, and understanding what will the consumer see when they're walking down the road and they see this other store that also looks the same. So, and going back to David as the the guy protecting these rights, it's kind of having those registrations in place that you can actually protect your consumers at the end of the day, the ones that are out there looking for your brand.
Okay, I will continue with you, because I think we have, Do you see dupes as a challenge to the luxury brands, an opportunity for innovation, both, or how do you see that?
I think, I mean, the challenge, as we've kind of talked about, is the erosion of market share. It's the dilution of the value of the luxury products. I think in many ways it can present an opportunity, one, to kind of tell your brand story. Again, going back to the podcast, which I recommend, I'll plug it again for Brand New. We had like a professional on there that was really talking around how brands need to tell the right story, and what is your value proposition. And I think that's the opportunity to say, we're being imitated, but with us, you're getting the best value product. You're getting, the research, the design, the customer service. In many cases, these aren't necessarily cheap products. And so I do think there is that kind of opportunity there. And I think looking at consumers, they're offering, do brands need to differentiate in terms of the product lines they have? Do they need to come closer to the consumers that want the dupes, but aren't buying the original products at the moment? So I think there are different avenues that brands can think about in terms of taking this forward. But I think they just need to be seen as in many ways, a competitor. It's a new competitor. It's hard to have new competitors, but hopefully that does drive innovation and being able to differentiate yourself in that market as well.
Okay, so Alastair, how do you think brands can protect their trademarks rights against dupes in this digital space without facing public backlash or potential cancel culture consequences? And then, so considering that the proliferation of dupes can weaken their distinctiveness, while aggressive enforcement on the other side may also harm their reputation.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think, I mean, putting back on my kind of brand owner hat in many ways, I think in many ways, I mean, if the brand, you need to kind of protect your brand. Ultimately, like, how much do you want to give away? And I think as soon as you start giving it away, especially with the rights that you have, I think you're going down into a very kind of murky territory. So I think there will always, and that's the thing, we live in an age where anyone can type anything they want online, and usually it's hard to kind of get that genie back in the bottle in many ways. But I think if you're doing it in the right way and you're telling the right story about why you're protecting your rights, I think that's going to be key. So I think that's one of the key things to think about. And I mean, many brands are aggressive in terms of the way they approach, because they need to be, because otherwise they just will unravel. And then, again, we go back to the exclusivity side of things. it's so hard to capture that again back. And there have been brands over time who have maybe taken their eye off the ball in terms of IP protection. And I think that's why it's important to always kind of come back to that fundamental point, is like, what do I have? Why do I want to protect it? And then go forward and do that with purpose, because I think that's the most important thing if you want to build and continue your brand in the real world.
There's another question about brands which are engaging themselves into collabs. So aren't the brands blurring the line themselves by engaging to collabs that can dilute their exclusivity by associating them with others? What do you guys think? Alastair?
Alastair, you want to take that, or you want to take it?
Yeah, I can just jump in quickly. I mean, having kind of been through this as well, I think done in the right way, collaborations can be great. I think they offer consumers from two different perspectives, from two different avenues, maybe, to come together and really collaborate. And I think that always comes down to kind of what has the brand done in kind of building that community and building the respect between it. And it's got to make sense from the branding point of view. You don't give away your rights to something that you're never going to get back again. I think that's where it needs to be kind of clear. I mean, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think in terms of creating excitement, it can definitely work in that way. But I think, yeah, like I say, you don't want to just give away everything you have for the sake of one collaboration.
Final thoughts. I mean, Alastair, what would you like to say to the audience? Maybe telling a little bit about your role with INTA. I think it's, so whatever you want, and then we finish with David.
Well, first of all, don't buy, no. I was going to say don't buy counterfeits. No, I think one of the things, I mean, what we're trying to do at INTA is really educate young consumers in terms of counterfeits and IP, and that's why we have the Unreal campaign. You can check us out on Instagram and as well. And basically, we're going into schools and we're educating students around intellectual property, the dangers of counterfeit goods. And I think that's also something that brands can get involved in as well. We do have like a number of brands that kind of back the Unreal campaign, which is great. And I think that's it. It's kind of, this whole story is around engaging with consumers, and whichever story that is. And I think counterfeits and IP, they're all wrapped up in that kind of question. So that's what I'd say is the way we look at this is just, we got to keep the consumer in mind. We've got to think about what they want and the way we approach them and the way we kind of tell the story of branding and IP as well. So I'll leave it there. Over to David.